Welcome to this special presentation. Enjoy the program.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Jeff Hopkins, and I am the Chief Judge of the United States Bankruptcy Court for the Southern District of Ohio, and I'm joined tonight in the live studio audience, such that it is, by E.J. Wunsch, one of our board members, and Lindsay Ford Ellis, who will be taking audience questions later for our fabulous panel. Proudly for the past 5 years, I've served as the president of the board of the Law and Leadership Institute, a pipeline program, one of the first of its kind, started over a decade ago under the leadership of the late Chief Justice Thomas J. Moyer. The Law and Leadership Institute provides over 700 hours of free intensive summer education experience for underserved students throughout the state of Ohio. LLI is a 4-year leadership program that partners with Ohio's 9 law schools to prepare underserved high school students for college and successful professional careers through law-related curricula and leadership training. Our students engage in forensic speech, exercises in writing composition, standardized test-taking practice, moot court and trial competitions, all under the watchful eye of LLI scholars, law students who are enrolled between their 1 and 2L years who have expressed a desire to perform nonprofit legal work. Our successful model has changed the trajectory of the lives of more than 1,000 students, high school students in and around the state of Ohio, from Akron to Cincinnati to Dayton to Cleveland, Toledo, and Columbus for over a decade. In February of this year, LLI received the prestigious Alexander Award from the ABA for excellence in pipeline diversity. We welcome you to part 2 of Leaders for Justice, a series designed by LLI with the idea of creating an equitable work environment for all. Our program, Food for Thought, attracted many hits on our website and our live stream audience. Our purpose at LLI, through sponsorship of programs like Food for Thought and tonight's program titled The Role of DE&I Plays in Firm and Business Culture and Governance, is to recognize and underscore and promote the singular core belief expressed in our nation's Constitution by our framers, and that is to say, we are one nation, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, a pledge we all recited daily as school children. When looking at the glossy web pages of our nation's law firms, one would think that all is well. As it relates to DE&I, there are smiling faces of would-be attorneys representing nearly every color, gender, and ethnicity. Beyond the slick marketing, law firm diversity figures remain quite low. In June, the ABA Journal, in a Mind Your Business column, the author, Colleen Cochran, citing a recent survey, wrote, "When it comes to retaining women and minorities they hire, firms face an even greater challenge. The attrition rate among women, and particularly women of color, is high. Some of the reasons given were women leaving the firm include unfair compensation systems, feelings of being sidelined in firms, and denial of access to significant assignments and pathways for advancement, lack of mentors, and the stress of trying to balance home life." In the face of these challenges, diversity and inclusion are becoming a business necessity. Clients, including many Fortune 500 companies, hedge funds, investors, and lending institutions, are demanding that their legal teams servicing their matters become more diverse, and not just as part of the pitch teams. Another reality facing our communities is the shifting demographics. It is a fact that our society is becoming more diverse and drawing from a more diverse workforce. Tonight we have a rare opportunity to hear the discussion of these important topics from 2 of the most accomplished lawyers in our country, who just so happen to also be persons of color. This 1-hour virtual program will provide practical ideas and helpful counsel from global lead partners on how law firms and businesses can build and maintain an enduring culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We are pleased to have LLI board member Ron Johnson, Chief Legal Officer for a key bank, moderate the panel with Shauna Johnson-Clark, Global and U.S. Chair at Norton Rose Fulbright, based in Houston, Texas, and Fred Nance, global managing partner at Squire Patton & Boggs, based in Cleveland, Ohio. Why, some might ask, is LLI an award-winning pipeline program engaged in this activity? The simple answer is that we at LLI are heavily invested in the future of our communities, our state, America, and the world our children and grandchildren will inherit. In the immortal words of the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., we aspire to have our children live and work in spaces where every person individually is judged by the content of their character and not by the color of their skin or their nationality, gender, or choice of life partner. Talent like the great inventor Steve Jobs, whose biological father was a Syrian immigrant, or Kizzmekia Corbett, an African-American woman scientist at the forefront of the COVID-19 vaccine development, is not ascribed to any one particular race or gender. At LLI, we believe that it is our calling as citizens, as lawyers, and as judges to find the promise in each child in the underserved parts of our state, who desire to learn about law and want to become leaders. So with that, I am going to have the video of Alexis Aparicio. Ron.
Good evening, and welcome to the first installation of Leaders for Justice, hosted by the Law and Leadership Institute. My name is Alexis Aparicio, and I am delighted to have the opportunity to welcome you to this event. The Law and Leadership Institute began in 2008 to help address the significant lack of diversity in the legal field. LLI, as we affectionately call it, works with students in Ohio's 6 largest cities to help create a vision for what is possible in their future, to develop the skills necessary to make that vision a reality, and to build a community of like-minded peers as well as professional mentors to support them in their pursuit of higher education and a professional career. Students enter LLI the summer before their 9th grade year and continue with the program throughout their high school careers. Throughout the program, students meet at Ohio's law schools and are instructed by current law students. As an alumna of the Law and Leadership Institute myself, I can say that without LLI, I would not be where I am today. This program helped me find my passion for law. LLI showed me that becoming an attorney was not only possible, but probable, because they would be there to support me every step of the way. Because of this consistent support, I found myself wanting to give back to this program, and I served as an instructor and a board fellow throughout my law school career. The Law and Leadership Institute's impact has grown tremendously since 2008. LLI has expanded their efforts to address the lack of diversity in the legal field to also include training of current law students serving as instructors, as well as tonight's panel, which is focused on helping professionals navigate ways to advance racial justice, to create a more equitable work environment, and to engage in critical conversations about systemic racism.
The work we do at the Law and Leadership Institute would not be possible without the support of many organizations that give to us. This event here this evening, the Leaders for Justice series, would not be possible without our amazing sponsors. I first want to thank the Ohio State Bar Foundation for underwriting this entire series with an incredibly supportive grant, in addition to their funding of LLI from our inception 13 years ago. Additionally, I want to thank our platinum sponsors, AEP, Squire Patton Boggs, Jones Day, and the Ohio State Bar Association that has also given us the space and the technology to make these events possible. Please remember that you can participate in tonight's conversation by entering your questions into the chat. We will have time at the end where those questions are presented to our panelists, so please don't be shy. Let us know what's on your mind so that we can involve what you are wondering about in the conversation as well. So let's get to the conversation. I want to introduce our moderator, Ron Johnson, who is the Chief Ethics Officer for KeyBank. He has been with KeyBank for 21 years, following time with the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland. He is a champion of giving back not only financially but with his time, which is also evidenced by his service on the LLI board. We are grateful for his time here this evening as he moderates this conversation. Ron.
Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you, Heather, for that wonderful introduction. I am pleased to moderate a panel of such august professionals. I wanted to first introduce everyone to Shauna Johnson-Clark, who is Norton Rose Fulbright's Global and U.S. Chair, as well as Head of its Employment and Labor Practice. She's a nationally recognized expert in labor and employment law, and she's also board certified in Texas, specializing in labor and employment. She hails from Tulane Law School and has enjoyed a number of professional recognitions, including but not limited Law Dragon 500 Leading Lawyers, Law Dragon 500 Legends, Savoy Magazine's Most Influential Black Lawyers, Texas Trailblazer, Best Lawyers in America, Texas Super Lawyer, and many, many more. Ms. Clark is a frequent speaker on labor and employment matters. She has presented speeches and conducted seminars for the American Bar Association, United Way, Houston Human Resource Management Association, and many others. And we are extremely fortunate to have her join us tonight as part of this program.
Thank you.
I also want to introduce everyone to Fred Nance, who is the global managing partner for Squire Patton Boggs and leads the firm's diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. He is a highly regarded legal and business counselor and nationally recognized sports and entertainment law practitioner. You may or may not know that Fred was one of the 5 finalists for the position of Commissioner of the National Football League to succeed Paul Tagliabue. Obviously, he didn't get that role, but he's still doing great work here in Greater Cleveland. His high-profile practice ranges from involvement in high-impact regional economic development matters to serving as formerly general counsel for the Cleveland Browns, serving as business counsel to NBA star LeBron James, comedian David Chappelle, and other notable athletes and entertainers. He's also an experienced trial litigator in federal and state courts, and he has a long track record of civic leadership at the highest levels in Greater Cleveland. And he has influenced in the background many, if not most, economic development projects that have fueled Cleveland's growth. Once again, we are extremely fortunate to have Fred join us this evening. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be fielding a few questions. As you listen to the conversation, we encourage you to think about questions that you would like to ask our panelists, because we will be entertaining questions from the audience in about 30 minutes or so. So the first question that I want to pose to our panelists is, when you think about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I'll use the term DEI to shorten it, how has DEI changed over the past 10 years or so? How has it remained the same? Please talk to us from a law firm perspective in your leadership roles, but also, what are you seeing with your clients?
Okay, I'd be happy to go first. Well, things obviously have been evolving over a long period of time on the DEI front, even the terminology and the jargon. But I dare say that the events of 2020, you could euphemistically capture them in the description as the summer of George Floyd. Everything changed about DEI. It changed because of the cataclysmic change, focus on social justice, racial justice in America, and of course our profession, our companies, our law firms, our governmental entities all had to stand up and take notice. And so I dare say there is a much greater emphasis on it now, with clients not just articulating lofty aspirational statements of inclusion and improvement, but holding their law firms accountable, asking for detailed data about who's doing their work, what is their position in the firm, who's receiving credit inside the firm for their work. And as a consequence, a lot of law firms who had generally articulated and had DEI programs or diversity programs are doubling down on their focus as well.
I agree wholeheartedly with what Fred has said, and the only additional comment I'd like to make is that even now there's a greater focus on increasing the numbers of diverse lawyers, women lawyers, but we need to make sure that there's a focus on inclusion, because for years we've had diversity and inclusion programs. It was more of a check the box from when clients would ask and hold us accountable. I never thought those reports went anywhere except to file 13. No one asked anything more than how many people of color on a matter and how many women. They didn't ask the roles, to Fred's point. So now they're asking firms to specifically identify the roles to give credit. But if we want to see lasting and sustained change here, we're going to have to focus on inclusion. And that means everyone will have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And we'll talk more about that. But that's how it's changed. But we saw this change in the early 90s. There was a boom. Firms were really focused on in recruiting diverse talent. And yet the statistics are very similar, particularly with respect to women of color who are equity partners. The numbers look exactly the same as they looked in the 90s. So unless we get to the point where we're focused not just on bringing people in, not just on giving them some work and putting them on the matter, but how are we going to make them feel included? How are we going to assure that they'll have a meaningful opportunity for success? Because we know if you don't have a sponsor or a mentor, someone there to guide you through your career, then the chances of someone, a diverse person or a person of color or a woman succeeding is very small.
I think that's a very excellent point that you make about inclusion and making sure there's a focus on inclusion and focusing on sponsorship. And so, Fred kind of talked about 2020 as being the summer of George Floyd. There are any number of euphemisms to describe this event and series of events that have awakened the consciousness of the country, so to speak. But the big question, there's a lot of skeptics out there. There's a lot of people out there who feel like, they're questioning, is this a moment? Is this a movement? Is there going to be real change? They've seen companies make public statements. They've seen companies undertake efforts to diversify their boards and do other things. But to your point, Shauna, we've kind of seen this before. What makes this different, and how do we make this sustainable? Can you talk a little bit about perhaps how you guys in the firm, in a global firm, are responding, and then what kind of advice would you offer those of us who are participating in this program? And we'll start with you, Shauna, if that's okay.
Yes, and I think that's an excellent question, whether it's a moment or, this is going to turn into, this momentum will turn into a mission. And I think the answer lies with all of us, with each of us. I had an opportunity to speak to some of my partners in London, and they asked the same question. And I looked at them, and of course I was the only person of color on the Zoom. And how do we keep this going? And I said, this depends on you. Because what can't happen is for America, for the law firms and the clients to look to people of color to solve all of the problems. Now, we can identify many of the problems, but what I think it takes to change this from a moment to, and use this momentum to make it a mission is making sure that each and every one of us with a voice, with influence, make sure that we use it. But more than that, I think we're going to have to rely on the allies, the CEOs, the board members, those individuals who are placed with the authority and the power to really not only begin this change, but help it to be sustained. And for us, what we're doing, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is at the top of every meeting. I liken it to safety from Texas in some of the chemical refineries or the chemical plants. And every meeting starts with a safety moment. Because they want to make sure that safety is top of mind for everyone, not just their employees, with their vendors, with their outside counsel. And imagine if we made DEI at the top of the agenda, a DEI moment at every meeting, making sure that we keep this just in front of everyone. And then we have those things as unconscious bias, having those courageous conversations. When we stop talking about this, when we prefer to just be comfortable, and not want to tackle the hard questions, then it's going to revert right back to the moments we've seen before.
Ron, first, there is good reason for the question, because I've been toiling in these vineyards for a number of decades. I won't count them out loud, but for the most part, during that period of time, aspirational statements that were certainly laudable and ambitious was the primary impact of focus on diversity inside big law firms. And as we know, things happen, unanticipated things happen that create the opportunity for a moment. Part of the challenge is the complexity of what it takes to improve the diversity performance of large law firms, and that is not a function. I certainly don't think there's explicit bias. There's very little of that left these days. It's not really tolerated almost anywhere. I do believe that implicit bias as an artifact of evolution is everywhere. We all have it. Being conscious of it and being willing to work to address it is part of what it takes to move the ball forward. But fundamentally, it is about the underlying business model of big law that has made the advancement of diversity so challenging. That in combination of what's going on in our industry / profession as a whole, meaning there is a large demand for people who look like Shauna and me to be successful in big law. There is a limited supply, so that means there is a value that's created that will cause diverse lawyers, if things aren't going well in a law firm, to have other alternatives, to move into another job opportunity, particularly if they don't feel embraced, if they don't see predecessors who look like them who were successful. Why should they continue to take the risk? What we do is rewarding in multiple ways, but it's also very difficult. It's very challenging. It requires a great deal of investment of your personal effort and indeed away from other pursuits in life, personal, other professional. And so diverse, and this is women, minorities, however you want to define diverse people have to believe there is a likelihood of success. Otherwise, these talented people will pursue other opportunities. That was the dynamic forever. Now that our clients are insisting upon it and holding their law firms accountable, their feet to the fire, if you will, there's suddenly this new focus, and frankly, a lot of big firms are scrambling to find diverse lawyers or to promote the diverse lawyers, just suddenly discovering them in their midst. And it requires a focus at the entry level to bring people in. Then you have to nurture, provide opportunities so people can progress in their skill set so that they are qualified to advance when those milestones come. And you might think, well, that should happen automatically for everybody. Well, it doesn't. There are, again, complicated factors into how work gets assigned, who gets the opportunity to work with what clients, but being mindful of that and making sure your diverse lawyers are receiving high quality opportunities so that they can advance their skill sets, develop the relationships that are necessary to advance is part of it. And at the more senior level, sharing clients, creating opportunities for more senior diverse lawyers to work with the firm's most important clients is what is going to move the needle. That's easy to say. It's hard to do because client relationships are personal. They have been established, developed over many years by people who have longstanding relationships, and bringing diverse people into those relationships takes purposefulness, takes focus, takes a willingness, starting at the very top of the law firm, to say, we're going to do things differently. And so all of those things need to happen simultaneously if we're actually going to move the needle. But I can tell you our clients are insisting upon it, which means the law firms are going to do their best to comply.
You know, that's kind of, it's very interesting, Fred, to kind of hear you talk about the business model and some of the things that need to change in order to enhance these opportunities. And if I can try to connect the dots with what Shauna talked about with respect to mentoring and sponsorship, you know, because you talked about it. There's a recruitment issue, and I think we all know diverse lawyers who have come into the profession. They've worked at a firm, they didn't have the best experience for whatever reason, and then they've chosen to either leave the profession or to move to a different environment. So, you know, when I think practically about sponsorship programs and what that should look like, and how do you nurture and train lawyers up so that they can understand, and as you, I think that as you mentioned, when opportunities for growth arise, that they're best qualified to receive those opportunities. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some of the things that you're seeing firms do to enhance those sponsorship opportunities? And then the corollary question is, I work for a company, and so you mentioned several times that companies or corporations are demanding more information around diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so, you know, it sounds like your clients have a lot of influence. And so what kinds of things would you expect to see from more companies to kind of help accelerate this? So it's a two-part question. Hopefully that makes sense.
I've got both parts.
All right.
First, on the sponsorship / mentor, they're obviously different, but you need both. And I will say that I have been the beneficiary of having had a couple of critical sponsorship relationships in my career, one of which was with a WASP who was 40 years my senior. We had virtually nothing in common, but we connected. I was wise enough to make myself indispensable to him as I was an associate, and he created all sorts of opportunities and pushed me forward in ways that I was startled at and wasn't sure I was capable of doing. So that is critical. Those types of relationships happen both formally and informally. Most firms have some version of a mentorship program. Often the mentor is another associate who can help them understand what is expected of them as they are coming along, someone to whom you can ask what might be theoretically dumb questions. But you also need a career mentor or a career sponsor, someone who's in a position to advance you and to advocate for you when it comes time for advancement through the associate ranks and ultimately up into partnership. And so a lot of firms are experimenting with ways to make those connections based upon shared interests or a common practice, but being purposeful about it, monitoring it, going beyond thinking the senior lawyer is going to take their mentee to lunch once a quarter. It's more about focusing on those things that are going to make that associate feel as if they are a part of the firm, and to advocate for them when those opportunities arise. I think firms have to be very purposeful about that. And I know there's this sensitivity around, should we assign only a diverse partner to a diverse lawyer as a sponsor, mentor, because they may be able to connect with each other and relate, or is that being patronizing? And I don't think there's a global answer. I think it depends on the culture of the firm. It depends upon the individuals. But I think we have to be willing to discuss these things out loud and not think we're going to offend someone by perhaps asking them their preference and doing it in a systematic way. And with respect to what clients can do, clients are in the process of doing it. This afternoon, and before I came over here, I received an email that the general counsel of a company that's a household name sent to all of her outside counsel, which was an article about how to coach diverse associates in the COVID environment. That would not have happened before 2020. It is an example of clients saying, we mean this. We expect you to improve your performance. There are clients who are actually establishing metrics, or at least asking questions about firms' metrics, and then saying, for my business, I want X percent of the lawyers on my account to be diverse. One of the things that we are in the process of looking at our firm is looking at our largest clients and take a look at, say, the top 5 lawyers billing time to that client, and are any of them diverse? And if they aren't, going to the responsible attorney and saying, well, we need to improve that. We'll give you X period of time, but you need to work some diverse people into that relationship. That doesn't hand anybody the client, but it creates the opportunity for diverse people to develop relationships with that client. And when clients make those types of demands on law firms respond. And I think we are at the beginning of the process of the clients getting into the data, the practices of firms, and saying, we want more than just aspirational statements. We want to see results, and holding law firms accountable by saying, we're going to have to morph this relationship, if not terminate the relationship over time. If you can't improve, that's how important this is. And so I think the clients are instrumental in law firms changing their ways.
Interesting.
Ron, I will tell you, we created our REC, our Racial Equity Council, in 2020 when all of this was going on. And it was only African-American partners and African-American lawyers and business services folks. There was one white man I invited into to REC. And our charge was to not only each of our black lawyers and our black business services professionals, and we were very specific and very intentional. And there was some questions raised as to why we're focusing on just the black lawyers. But leading from our management committee on down, this is what we're going to do. And when we look, and so what we did, so each of our black lawyers had a REC sponsor, and we also had 2 sponsors in the firm, two partners. And what we did is we looked at and worked with the practice group leaders to identify those most profitable partners, the partners with a lot of business, with those great clients, and we assigned 2 of those partners to each lawyer. And I will tell you, from just the improvement of utilization from one year to the next is phenomenal.
Wow.
And it's because, to Fred's point, we do what's comfortable, what we normally do, and we all have those people that we're going to go to, your go-to lawyers. And typically, when you're someone like me, your go-to lawyer might not look like me. Mm-hmm. Like Fred, it's so interesting. Our experiences have been so similar. When I came in as a first-year lawyer, I didn't realize it then, but I had the best sponsor in the world. He just so happens to be a 65-year-old Italian-American. And this man stayed at the firm, would not retire until I made partner. And because of his sponsorship, we didn't have anything in common other than our love of the Lord. He was staunchly Catholic, my family's Catholic, and he was interested in everything about me, not just my work, but just making sure I didn't get lost in this big firm because I was the only black woman at the time. So I know what good sponsors look like. I've had 5 very powerful white men play instrumental roles in my career, and that's what it takes. And so I speak to that, and that's what REC speaks to. So we have these sponsors assigned to each of our black lawyers, but we've had to have these very uncomfortable conversations with the rest of the partnership, because there will always be that question whenever you have a program like ours: what about me? And are you giving one group of people something that you're denying others? And you know, my point is, you know, there's no limit to justice and equality. We can, just because I'm giving an opportunity to one person doesn't mean I'm taking an opportunity from someone else. And so, but we had to be very formal and intentional about creating the program, and we spent a lot of time in creating the program and then rolling it out. And we had the partners who are REC sponsors, they had to receive training. Our proteges had to receive training, because the flip side of it is, you know, more and more I'm thinking that lawyers aren't as resilient as they need to be. Like, you're asked to do, you know, I wasn't asked to do anything. At least I didn't think it was an ask. It was, Shauna, go here, do this, and I did it. And I'll tell you, that's exactly how it should have been. A good sponsor, there's a trust relationship. He or she will tell you what to do, and if you have a teachable heart, you do it, and usually it works out. But that's what we've done. But with respect to the clients, I've never had a situation where a client has been resistant to having me either try cases or be the lead lawyer once given the opportunity. And we're talking about the relationships with these clients. You know, there's a compensation component that's tied to that client, that when you bring someone else into that relationship and they start sending work to that other person, then that may affect your compensation. And so you have to have a macro view of how that all works, and encourage partners and senior lawyers to open those relationships. But when I meet with clients and they ask me, Shauna, why, you know, what's it going to take for you to, and by you, Norton Rose Fulbright, to increase the number of women or people of color in the equity partner ranks? And it's like, that depends on you, because the more work you send, the greater my chance of making partner. The more work you send directly to those women and people of color, that is what drives, at the end of the day, that's what drives law firm success. It's just about amount of money we get from clients, amount of business. And once we get that business, and if they are intentional about making sure that the people they see at pitches, that the lawyers who are working on files, not just putting in the hours, but coming to the meetings and, you know, leading the hearings or whatever the responsibility may be, if clients ask that, and by ask I mean tell law firms, this is what I expect to see, then that's all it really takes. If that lawyer has the resiliency, who will step up when you have that at bat and take it, because that's the other issue. But I've seen clients, they are very welcoming because they want to see diversity. But we just have to, as law firms, be intentional about making sure everyone has access to those opportunities.
Excellent. No, I appreciate those remarks, and I know we want to open up the. We're going to open up the panel for audience questions. But one question that I have for you, I just want to kind of dig a little bit deeper when you talk about resilience, because on the one hand, we kind of talk about what law firms and law firm leadership and partners should do, but what should we be telling diverse attorneys, especially our newer attorneys who are entering this profession? I mean, this is not easy work.
It's not.
The environments aren't easy. I like what Fred said earlier, which is we have to come into this with the mindset that we're going to be successful, that we can be successful. How do we teach that? Because I don't know if this is a generational thing or not. I might be telling my age, I don't know what I'm doing here, but it does sometimes feel like, some of our newer attorneys aren't as, I hate to use this term, but thick-skinned, right? That's the term that I grew up on. What should we be teaching younger attorneys about resilience and their vision success? You know, how do we prepare them and prepare ourselves for our blessings?
There are two sides to this. And the reason why some of us are a bit reticent is because for people of color, the margin of error is razor thin. It's one and done. So we have to, on one side, make sure the partners and those people who are evaluating the people of color, that they understand that everyone needs to have the opportunity and oxygen to make mistakes. We all make mistakes, no matter how, maybe not Fred.
Well,
But
yeah, I think he made one mistake back in '79.
That's been hidden. But we all make, and that's what when we talk about rec, that's what I say to our partners. Who of you, I mean, everyone has made mistakes. My boss used to say, Shauna, and this is why he gave me the opportunity to just, to be me, to take the shot. There are very few fatal mistakes. You forget to file an answer and there's a default judgment that we can't overturn. That's a fatal mistake. But short of that, everyone makes mistakes. And so when I had the confidence to know that, one, I'm really good, I'm going to take my shot, and if it doesn't work out, then it's not the end of the world. And so I had that support, and it gave me the confidence. You know, I had confidence, but I wasn't fearful. So I was able to come in and do me and show them exactly what I was capable of doing. And I did not have any qualms with competing against the two white guys who started with me. In the back of my mind, I always thought that I was better. And I had the same opportunities as they had. They looked differently at the time. So I think if we get our partners to appreciate that unconscious bias, and that there's data to prove that if names are off memos and a partner thinks it was prepared by a white lawyer versus a black lawyer, the white lawyer's memo is graded much higher than the black lawyer's memo. So we know that this exists. So that's the one side. But the other side of that is, when I mentor and sponsor young lawyers, you're not going to get a million chances to be great. So when that opportunity comes, you have to take your shot. Like and I've had lawyers say, you know, it's one, and I still to this day I'm disappointed. This young woman, and it was time for her to take her first plaintiff's deposition. She's like, I just can't. Or the lawyer who was supposed to take a witness at trial. The last trial I was in a couple years ago, I forced the associate, because we were walking, she's like, I can't do it. I'm like, yes, you can. And so, but she had that, and she was superb. I mean, she was prepared, she was superb, but she needed to know that I had her back. And so sometimes for us, we have to push them a little bit and give them the assurance and the confidence to know, I have you, I have your back. Because that's what everyone else has. The people who don't look like us, they have that confidence that, we were in the same fraternity. We went to the same law school. We have so much in common. If I make a mistake, we're going to talk about it over beer or on the golf course, and you're going to make it okay. That's what sponsors do. Our folks, people like us, we've not had that opportunity, that freedom. So I do think that there's a thin-skinnedness to the newer lawyers, but at the same time, I could appreciate why that is. And so we need to toughen folks up on the one hand, but at the same time, give them the oxygen and the opportunity to make mistakes like we all do.
And if I could piggyback on that, we had 10 summer associates in Cleveland this past summer, 5 of whom were African American, and I got a chance to spend time with each of them. And one of them, when she sat down in my office, the first question she asked me, she said, well, you've been here a long time. How do you deal with your imposter syndrome? I'm seldom at a loss for words, but I had to ask, what is imposter syndrome? As I say, there is a generational aspect to this. And she had to explain to me. She said, well, you know, we don't belong here. They don't really want us here. This is a moment when clients are insisting, but there's no real future. How have you stayed here so long dealing with that? And, you know, I had to tell her the truth. If I have to ask you what it is, guess what? I don't have those feelings. I've never had those feelings. My perspective has always been, here's your opportunity to compete, go compete. But there is such a lack of connection in terms of cultural background, familial background. You know, most of the diverse lawyers, certainly African-American lawyers, I know this was true of me, I hadn't met anyone in life who could afford to hire my law firm when I joined the law firm. And so that's a tall challenge. One of the things that we are trying to do is to connect those young lawyers with more senior lawyers, and that has proven to be very effective in terms of helping them to understand how the senior lawyers advanced and how these diverse lawyers can do the same thing. I mean, as we discussed, the assignment of work, while again, I don't think there is purposeful discrimination going on in most cases, but I'll tell you as an example, I belong to a managing partner group. And when one of the managing partners was retiring, he said, you know, as I look back, one of my big regrets is, as I looked over this long course of time, during recessions, during times of work slowing down, when I looked back over the years, it was always the diverse lawyers, whether they were associates or partners, who became lesser utilized. And he said, I didn't realize it was happening. And what happens is, human nature is such that we all connect with, relate to people who remind us of ourselves. And when resources are scarce, that's what happens. And until there's enough critical mass of diverse lawyers in the senior ranks who are handing out the business, it tends to become a self-fulfilling prophecy, which is why, once again, clients intervening and, frankly, forcing firms to do those things that are going to move the needle has become very, very pivotal to making progress. And we are in one of those moments that we hope is going to turn into a movement.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. So are we ready for audience questions?
We are.
Okay.
Can you hear me okay? All right. So one question from the audience is, how do you avoid a situation where a partner puts you on the pitch to have a diverse face and then doesn't give you the work?
I'm happy to answer that question. Conversation. That is exactly a scenario one of our associates in London called to talk to me about. That she knew she had a connection with this particular client. She's African American, outstanding projects lawyer, and she told me that she didn't know if we'd gotten a business and if she was going to get any work. And I said, so have you spoken with the partner about it? And she's like, no. And so I gave her a script, and I said, no, I need you to write this down. And I wrote down the script. We talked about the script, and I said, and I want to hear from you a week from today, because I want to hear about this conversation. And then from that point, because you need to make sure that you're bringing value to that relationship. And if there is some window dressing going on, if someone is just brought to a pitch because they're black or a woman or black woman or whatever, that's a problem. And if that's the problem, then that needs to be addressed through different avenues. But I've never, I'm a glass 3/4 full person. And I tend to give most people the benefit of the doubt. You have to do me dirty for a few times. And so I told her that sometimes we get really busy and you forget to go back to the group to say, this is what happened. It may be that the work that came in is not work that she does. It could be, but it starts with a conversation. And not a confrontation. It may need to be a professional confrontation, but it starts with a conversation. You know, we went on this pitch. I had a great time. Thank you for the opportunity. I learned a lot watching everyone pitch, engage with the client. What happened? What's the result? Did we win the work? If so, did we, you know, if we won the work, then I'm available. I have time, and I would appreciate an opportunity to work with you, to work with this client. So that's how I would handle it. And if one of my lawyers called, that's what I would tell them. But what's important is she knows that I don't have any hesitation picking up the phone and calling. But it shouldn't have to, calling the partner to ask what came of that work. But that's how I would handle it. I would start with a conversation and offer. Most people want to receive offers to help. I would love to work on this assignment for this client. And then from there, you know, there's other homework to do. Stay on that client when there's something in the paper in the news about the client, call the library to make sure there's a dinger that you get a notice of every time that client appears in any type of report, and you keep that information. You go back to the partner to say, did you know this? And so that continues to build a relationship. And more than that, it's more than just that client. She has now started to build a relationship with this partner who very well, considering how industrious she is, will want to work with her on other matters with other clients. Again, that assumes the best.
No, as I reflect on Shauna's comments, I mean, it sounds like one of the lessons that we all need, really, is how to be our own advocate.
Advocate
right?
for yourself.
We advocate for our clients all the time, but when it comes to our own careers and opportunities, sometimes we're a little bit, more reticent to advocate for ourselves. And it sounds like that's sort of a recurring theme from your remarks. Fred, I'm
There
sorry.
are also things that firms can do structurally in order to try to minimize the impact of those issues. One of the things that we did, we have a Black and other diverse professional task force that was created to identify best practices that the firm can employ, and it has made recommendations to our global board, including that we've hired a consultant who is helping us evaluate the utilization levels of our diverse lawyers, and if they aren't being utilized at the same levels as their white peers or white male peers, we get behind it to figure out why. And the situation where somebody is used on a pitch, you use the term window dressing, that has happened in our profession. I think there's such an awakening now that it shouldn't be happening much at all anymore. But that is a vehicle for the associate to come back so that the associate doesn't have to have that difficult conversation with a partner they're hoping to get more opportunity from. We do it through the structure, and we will talk to that partner and ask about, this group was part of your pitch team, or this was the group that was included in the materials you supplied. We're hoping that the diverse lawyers on that team get the opportunity to participate as well. I think that tone has to be set at the top, that from the very top of the firm, that is the expectation of performance for your colleagues. And it is something that we talk about at comp time, at compensation time. Part of our annual compensation process, of course, is self-evaluation by partners. That's what it begins with. Well, we are beefing up in the criteria for self-evaluation the role you have played in supporting our firm's diversity objectives. Who specifically are you working with? How are you helping to move the needle so that, say, by this time next year, we have a stronger DEI performance? That's something that culturally, as I said, has to be said at the top. And when you say it out loud, when you tell partners that is the expectation, they tend to respond, particularly around the topic of compensation.
Compensation.
Understood.
Another question we have is, as attorneys of color, especially in leadership positions, do you feel pressure to be every other attorney of color's sponsor?
I know Fred has some interesting remarks about that. You know, I don't feel driven to be every African American sponsor because not every African American lawyer has reached out to me. And so I will sponsor and mentor as many as I possibly can, but not just people of color. I mentor a whole range of people because that's what I do. I love people and I love being able to help. And so I've never felt that they only came to me because they didn't have any others, because there are other Black partners. But I'm there to help as many informally as I possibly can.
Yeah, I would say yes and no. Is that about cover the waterfront? Yes, in the sense that certainly if there are situations where there is a talented, diverse lawyer who doesn't seem to be getting the opportunities or is somehow not, frankly, being judged in a way that seems objectively fair, yes, I'll intervene. I'll try to make that situation better. But Shauna mentioned self-help is a prerequisite to being successful in this profession. You have to, and this is a conversation that I have with incoming diverse lawyers all the time, about being resilient. You know, we get into, particularly with young folks these days, this question about, can I bring my authentic self to work? And my response to that is, it depends on who you are. But this notion that they can't really be themselves, or that, you know, they feel like an imposter, you know, you got to get that behind you. You have to advocate for yourself. You have to go out and seek opportunities. And then if you run into closed doors or blind alleys, I'll try to be proactive to help. But the same way we serve our clients, not by doing just what we're asked, but by being proactive, thinking about what it's going to take to be successful, to make progress, to affirmatively offer strategies. We need our diverse lawyers to do that for themselves, and then we can reach out and meet them halfway.
Real quick, Fred, on that note, we have a question. What is the appropriate and proper way to ask somebody to be their sponsor?
I think first, if you practice in the same area, work with them and hit the ball out of the park, score a hat trick, whatever sports analogy you want to use. When you work with them, do a tremendous job. And they're going to want to come back to you and develop a relationship. If you are seeking a relationship with somebody who's outside of your practice specialty, it's still about developing a personal relationship. And the best way to do that is to ask a senior person about themselves. Because guess what? All us old folks love to pontificate about what we did and how we got there. And then you figure out a point of connection, something they said about themselves that you can connect with. And then you just keep the conversation going. Because of electronic communication, it doesn't have to be intrusive. You don't have to walk in and disrupt what they're doing during the day. If we ever get back to walking into people's offices on a regular basis again, you can reach out electronically, and when they have time, they will respond. There are very few, I don't care how successful, how busy, how high a level a partner there is in a law firm, if a colleague, even a brand new associate, reaches out and says, I'm really curious about what you do. Can you share something with me about that? Being proactive that way, finding the point of connection, and then even if it's in a different practice area, volunteer to be helpful any way that you can. And those relationships will develop after that without you actually having to ask them to be your sponsor.
Ron, do you want to conclude?
Yeah, I just, so thanks everyone for listening, and to the panelists, I really appreciated their remarks. A lot of wisdom here I like the self-help and the self-advocacy aspects of it. And hopefully this is more than just a moment. So thank you very much for your remarks.
Our pleasure.
Turn to our next video featuring LLI alum Amokai Okolo.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amokai Okolo, and I'm an alumni of the Law and Leadership Institute from Akron, Ohio. As we've seen from this conversation, there's no quick fix to creating a more equitable work environment in our firms and corporations. It's not always easy or comfortable having these tough conversations around race, especially in a corporate environment. But these conversations, they're necessary, especially if the goal is to truly make our companies, law firms, and the larger legal community a more equitable and inclusive one. As a graduate of the Law and Leadership Institute, I can say that investing in programs that create meaningful opportunities for marginalized communities is one concrete step we can make towards creating that change. You know, speaking from experience, I can tell you that that investment, it works. Through this program, I've gained mentors, built lasting relationships, and have gained valuable experiences and skills that have helped me go on to obtain my bachelor's degree, graduate from law school, pass the bar exam, and now be starting my career at Jones Day in Cleveland, Ohio. And as you leave this session today, know that this conversation, it doesn't end here. We need to put these suggestions into action and certainly continue to engage in these tough conversations around race with our friends, family, and especially our workplaces. You know, together, we can be the change that we hope to see, but only if we do the work. Thank you.
Thank you again for joining us this evening. We hope you will join us for the third part of the Leaders for Justice series, which will be November 3rd, a CLE with updates from the judiciary. We will be live at the State House, hopefully, and we'll also be live streaming. So for those of you who are not able to get to the State House, we hope you will join us as well. Information on how to register will be going out shortly. Again, thank you to all of our sponsors, especially to the Ohio State Bar Foundation, our platinum sponsors of Squire Patton Boggs, Jones Day, AEP, and the Ohio State Bar Association. Have a good evening. Thank you.
All right.